Lesson 13. Israel, in Egypt.
Memory text. So Israel dwelled in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions there, and grew, and multiplied exceedingly. Genesis 47:27.
Jacob, now Israel, settles in Egypt and is reunited with Joseph. Israel meets and blesses Pharaoh. This continues the promise made to Abraham that through him the nations will be blessed. By referring to Jacob as Israel, this in a subtle way shows Pharaoh who is greater.
Jacob blesses all of his sons and predicts how they will affect the future tribes of Israel. The Promised Land is once again distant. Israel lives in exile, but Genesis ends with the promise to bring their descendants back to the Promised Land.
Jacob goes to Joseph.
Genesis 46:1-4. So Israel took his journey with all that he had, and came to Beersheba, and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. Then God spoke to Israel in the visions of the night, and said, "Jacob, Jacob." And he said, "Here I am." So he said, "I am God, the God of your father. Do not fear to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation there. I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also surely bring you up again, and Joseph will put his hand on your eyes."
God calls Jacob to Egypt and reassures him that all will be well. He will die in peace with the promise that his descendants will one day reclaim the land of Canaan.
Jacob would not have been so eager to go. Grief, family problems, deceptions, all must have added to the pains of old age. But God's calling lightens his heart. Not only will he see Joseph, but his family will be well fed and taken care of.
This repeats promises to Abraham. Do not fear, you will be made into a great nation. So Jacob, his sons, wives, and their children, all depart with the promise of a bright future. There were 70 people in all, including Joseph and his sons. Perhaps this correlates to the 70 nations mentioned in Genesis 10. Every nation will eventually be influenced by Israel.
We know this really points to the Messiah. All the lessons of redemption we learn in Genesis have no meaning without Jesus Christ. Romans 10:12-13. For there is no distinction between Jew and Greek, for the same Lord over all is rich to all who call upon him. For whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. The plan of salvation, through the promises to Abraham, is revealed as going to all humanity. The cross of Jesus was the fulfillment. We now take on Israel's responsibility to spread the gospel to the world.
Jacob settles in Egypt. Jacob does believe Joseph is alive, but waits for God to tell him to go to Egypt. Jacob goes to Egypt under God's command. This is different than what Abraham did. Abraham went without God's instruction. Isaac endured a famine and wanted to go to Egypt. But God intervened and stopped him.
The Bible tells us it is much better to pray and wait on the Lord to instruct us. Jacob and his family live well for many years. But this same Egypt will one day be a place the Hebrews will despise and flee.
Joseph takes 5 brothers to meet with Pharaoh. Like all royal meetings, there is an advisor that meets with them first and instructs them how to act. Joseph acts as this advisor. Pharaoh inquired of them their occupations to be sure they would live in the most convenient location for them and not to offend Pharaoh.
Pharaoh honors them through Joseph and allows them to settle in Goshen, where there is water and good pasture land. He even puts them over his own livestock. Jacob also stands before Pharaoh. In that Egyptian culture, Pharaoh was looked upon as high priest of their religion. Jacob blesses Pharaoh in an act that puts Jacob as a higher priest.
His name, Israel, has connotations of being above Pharaoh, overcoming and wrestling with none other than God himself. Joseph had already been shown to have a close relationship with God. While Pharaoh was not a believer in this same God, he did think Joseph was in tune with what he thought was a spiritual power. Israel appears to command this same respect.
Both Joseph and Jacob have true priestly attributes. We should strive to do the same. 1 Peter 2:9. But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him, who called you out of darkness, into his marvelous light.
Jacob blesses Joseph's sons. As Jacob prepares to die, he takes comfort in the future hope. His descendants will return to the promised land, and he blesses Joseph's sons with the future in mind. Manasseh and Ephraim are the only grandsons of Jacob that he blesses. He also puts the younger one, Ephraim, ahead of his older brother. Jacob's blessings have insight into the character and future of each one blessed.
The blessing of Joseph's sons puts Joseph now above his brothers in a priestly manner. Jacob has made Joseph to be the spiritual leader. After what his brothers experienced, they would have no reason to object. Jacob in a sense adopts Manasseh and Ephraim as his own sons, elevating them to be the future tribe of Joseph, split into two shares. Technically, there will be 13 tribes of Israel returning to the promised land.
Jacob affirms his trust in God's faithfulness in the past and present. He now puts those promises with Joseph and on the future nation of Israel. We partake of these blessings today.
Acts 3:25-26. You are sons of the prophets, and of the covenant which God made with our fathers, saying to Abraham, and in your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. To you first, God, having raised up his servant Jesus, sent him to bless you, in turning away every one of you from your iniquities.
Jacob blesses his sons. The blessings and final thoughts on each son resonate with prophecy, character, and personal tendencies. Jacob pointed out what he saw in the potential future of each one, and bestowed blessings and warnings to each. Most are not to be thought of as predestined. Each man has choices. Judah, who had completely changed, was now in line to carry the banner to the Messiah.
Genesis 49:10. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the people. Shiloh is often referred to as a heavenly peace, and stand for a Messiah. Judah will hold the literal, and symbolic throne, on earth, until Jesus comes.
His descendants will include King David and continue to Jesus. The fulfilling end will be when Jesus returns with eternal peace. Every knee will bow to the King. Philippians 2:10. That at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, of those in heaven, and of those on earth, and of those under the earth.
Nations around the world are turning the other way. One day everyone will be humbled before the throne of King Jesus. This day will be a day of rejoicing, and of sorrow. How are you preparing for this? On a daily basis, we should bow in prayer and praise to the living God through Jesus.
The hope of the promised land. Israel now has hope in that his family will return to Canaan. He asks his sons to bury him in Canaan, at the cave of Machpelah, where Sarah was buried. When they do, the funeral procession is similar to the Exodus from Egypt hundreds of years later. After Jacob dies, Joseph's brothers are now worried that they will be treated harshly for past deeds. But Joseph has assured them that God's hand was there. He turned their evil into good. We are reminded many times in Genesis how God takes our human failures and uses them for good, even to see the promises through.
The book of Genesis ends with the death of Joseph. But it is not the end, it is only the beginning. He asks that his bones will be eventually carried back to Canaan. This journey begins in Exodus, but will symbolically end when the New Jerusalem is restored. Humanity will continue to fall. The Israelites will live in the Promised Land, but the Messiah will lead his people to the final resting place of salvation and restoration of a new heaven and earth.
Revelation 21, 1-4. Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away.